Subscribe to my YouTube channel for deeply emotional, romantic, and mature stories that echo through your heart. Don't forget to like, share, and comment to support meaningful storytelling. The rain drummed against the kitchen window like restless fingers, each drop carrying with it the weight of unspoken words that hung heavy in the air between them. Sarah stood at the counter, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long since gone cold, watching a storm outside mirror the tempest brewing within the walls of her carefully constructed life. She had thought the hardest part was behind. Erasing her stepson Marcus through his teenage years, watching him grow from the sullen 15-year-old who had resented her presence to the confident young man who now sat across from her at the kitchen table. But tonight, something had shifted, and she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. Marcus cleared his throat, the sound cutting through the comfortable silence they had shared for the past 20 minutes. At 22, he had his father's strong jawline and piercing blue eyes, but where David's gaze had always been warm and inviting, Marcus's held an intensity that made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. She had noticed it more frequently lately, the way his eyes would linger on her face when she laughed, the way he would find excuses to brush past her in the hallway, the way conversations that should have been simple suddenly felt charged with electricity. "Sarah," he said, his voice deeper than she remembered from just a few months ago. "We need to talk." She turned from the window, forcing a smile that she hoped looked more natural than it felt. "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" The endearment rolled off her tongue as it had countless times before, but tonight it seemed to hang in the air between them like a bridge neither of them was sure they should cross. Marcus had been calling her Sarah since she married his father 5 years ago, never quite managing to call her Mom, despite her gentle encouragement. She had accepted it, understanding that she was stepping into a role that had been carved out by grief and loss, trying to fill shoes that would never quite fit. "It's about Dad," Marcus began, his fingers drumming against the wooden table in a rhythm that matched the rain outside. "About the business trip." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. David had been traveling more frequently for work lately, leaving her and Marcus alone in the house for days at a time. She had told herself it was natural David was building his consulting firm, and success required sacrifice. But lately, she had begun to wonder if there was something more to his frequent absences, something that went beyond mere professional obligation. "What about it?" she asked, moving to sit across from him at the table, close enough to see the conflict playing out in his eyes. Marcus leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table, his hands clasped together so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. "He's not coming back tomorrow like he said he would." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. David had promised to be home by Thursday evening, had sworn that this trip would be the last one for a while. They had made plans dinner at their favorite restaurant, a weekend getaway to the mountains, time to reconnect after weeks of hurried conversations and stolen moments between his departures. "How do you know?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the storm outside. "I called his hotel," Marcus said, his eyes never leaving her face. "They said he checked out 3 days ago. I tried his cell, but it went straight to voicemail." "Sarah, I don't think he's been on a business trip at all." The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too intimate, the air thick with implications that Sarah wasn't ready to face. She had suspected, of course, the late-night phone calls that David would take in his study with the door closed, the way he had grown distant and distracted, the excuses that had become more elaborate and less believable. But hearing it confirmed, seeing the pain in Marcus's eyes as he delivered the news, made it real in a way that her private suspicions never had. "I'm sorry," Marcus continued, his voice softer now, gentler. "I know this isn't what you wanted to hear." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the foundations of her carefully constructed world begin to crumble. She had built her life around the idea of family, of creating a home where love could flourish despite the complications of blended relationships and shared grief. She had poured herself into caring for Marcus, into supporting David's dreams, into becoming the kind of woman who could hold a family together through anything. "Why did you call the hotel?" she asked, opening her eyes to find Marcus studying her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Because I was worried about you," he said simply. "I've been watching you wait for him, checking your phone every few minutes, making his favorite dinner even though he's not here to eat it. I couldn't stand seeing you hope for something that wasn't going to happen." The tenderness in his voice broke something inside her chest, a careful barrier she had built to keep certain feelings at bay. She had been so focused on being a good wife, a good stepmother, that she had forgotten what it felt like to be truly seen, to have someone notice her pain and care enough to spare her from more of it. "Marcus," she whispered, but he was already moving, rising from his chair and coming around the table to kneel beside her. "I hate seeing you hurt," he said, his hands reaching out to cover hers where they rested on the table. "You deserve so much better than this." His touch was warm, comforting, but there was something else there too, something that made her pulse quicken and her breath catch. She looked down at their joined hands, at the way his fingers fit perfectly between hers, and felt a dangerous warmth spreading through her chest. "He's your father," she said, the words coming out as a plea rather than a statement. "And you're the woman who raised me when he was too busy to notice I existed," Marcus replied, his voice rough with emotion. "You're the one who stayed up with me when I had nightmares, who taught me how to drive, who celebrated every small victory and helped me through every failure. You're the one who's been here, Sarah. Really here." The intensity in his voice made her look up, and she was startled to find his face closer than she had expected. She could see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes, could feel the warmth of his breath on her cheek. For a moment, the world seemed to stop, suspended in the space between heartbeats, between the life she had known and the one that beckoned from the other side of a line she had never imagined crossing. "This is wrong," she whispered, but even as she said it, she made no move to pull away. "Is it?" Marcus asked, his thumb tracing gentle circles on the back of her hand. "Is it wrong to care about someone who's been abandoned? Is it wrong to want to protect the person who protected you?" Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs as she struggled to find solid ground in a world that had suddenly shifted beneath her feet. She had spent 5 years building walls around certain feelings, telling herself that the connection she felt with Marcus was purely maternal, that the way her heart skipped when he smiled was nothing more than pride in the young man he had become. But now, kneeling beside her in the soft light of the kitchen, his eyes full of a longing that matched her own, she couldn't pretend anymore. The truth was there, in the way her body responded to his touch, in the way she had found herself looking forward to their conversations more than her husband's return, in the way she had begun to see him not as the boy she had helped raise, but as the man he had become. "I've been thinking about this for months," Marcus confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "About you, about us, about what it would be like if things were different." "They're not different," Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Aren't they?" Marcus asked, leaning closer. "When's the last time he really looked at you, Sarah? When's the last time he asked about your day, your dreams, your fears? When's the last time he made you feel like you mattered?" The questions hit her like arrows, each one finding its mark in the tender places of her heart, where disappointment had been quietly growing. She couldn't remember the last time David had really seen her, had looked at her with anything more than casual affection. Their conversations had become functional, focused on schedules and obligations rather than the dreams and fears that had once bound them together. "That doesn't make this right," she said. But even as she spoke, She found herself memorizing the warmth of Marcus's hands, the way he looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. Maybe right and wrong aren't the only things that matter, Marcus said, his free hand reaching up to gently cup her cheek. Maybe sometimes what matters is finding someone who sees you, who values you, who would never take you for granted. Sarah closed her eyes, leaning into his touch despite every rational thought screaming at her to pull away. She had been so starved for genuine affection, for the feeling of being truly cherished, that his tenderness felt like water in the desert. "I'm scared," she admitted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "Of what?" Marcus asked, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "Of this," she said, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. "Of wanting something I can't have. Of destroying what little family we have left." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching her face as if looking for something he desperately needed to find. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with emotion. "What if the family we have isn't worth saving?" he asked. "What if we're holding on to something that's already broken?" The question hung in the air between them, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Sarah felt as if she was standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that whatever decision she made would change everything, would send her tumbling into an unknown future where the rules she had lived by no longer applied. "I can't," she whispered, but her body betrayed her, leaning closer to him, drawn by a magnetism she couldn't resist. "You can," Marcus said, his lips now inches from hers. "You can choose to be happy, Sarah. You can choose to be with someone who will never leave you waiting, never make you wonder if you're enough." The promise in his words was intoxicating, the possibility of being loved completely and without reservation after years of settling for scraps of attention and affection. She could feel herself weakening, could feel the careful walls she had built around her heart beginning to crumble. "Marcus," she breathed his name like a prayer, a plea, a surrender. "I love you," he said, the words falling between them like stones into still water, creating ripples that would spread far beyond this moment. "I've loved you since I was 18, and finally understood what love really meant. I've loved you through every girlfriend, every relationship that never quite worked because none of them were you." The confession shattered the last of her defenses, leaving her exposed and vulnerable in a way that was both terrifying and exhilarating. She had never imagined that love could feel like this, overwhelming and gentle at the same time, wrong and right, impossible and inevitable. "This will destroy everything," she said, but her hand was already moving to rest against his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his heart beneath her palm. "Maybe," Marcus agreed, his forehead resting against hers. "Or maybe it will be the beginning of something beautiful." The storm outside had intensified, the rain now coming in sheets against the windows that Sarah barely noticed. Her world had narrowed to this moment, to the man before her, whose love she had never dared to hope for, but had always secretly craved. "If we do this," she said, her voice trembling, "there's no going back." "I don't want to go back," Marcus said, his hands framing her face with infinite tenderness. "I want to go forward with you, wherever that leads." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 5 years of carefully maintained boundaries pressing down on her. She thought of David, probably in the arms of another woman, building a life that no longer included her. She thought of the empty years stretching ahead if she continued to live by rules that had already been broken by someone else. "I'm not brave enough," she whispered. "You are," Marcus said, his lips brushing against her forehead in a kiss that felt like a benediction. "You're the bravest person I know. You took on a broken family and made it whole. You loved a grieving boy and helped him become a man. You stayed when everyone else would have left. His words wrapped around her like a blanket, warming places. That had been cold for too long. She realized that she had been waiting for permission to want this, to want him. And now he was offering it to her with open hands and an open heart. I love you too, she said, the words coming out in a rush, as if she were afraid that hesitation would rob her of the courage to say them. I've been fighting it for so long, telling myself it was wrong, that I was wrong for feeling this way. Marcus's smile was radiant, transforming his face from handsome to breathtakingly beautiful. You're not wrong, he said. You're perfect. The kiss, when it came, was everything Sarah had imagined and more. It was gentle and desperate, tender and passionate, a perfect contradiction that somehow made complete sense. She felt as if she were drowning and being saved at the same time, lost and found, broken and whole. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Sarah felt as if the world had shifted on its axis. Everything looked different now. The familiar kitchen, the storm outside, the future that stretched ahead of them. Nothing would ever be the same. What happens now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch sending shivers down her spine. Now we figure it out together, he said. One day at a time, one moment at a time. Sarah nodded, feeling a strange sense of peace settling over her despite the chaos of emotions swirling in her chest. For the first time in years, she felt truly alive, truly seen, truly cherished. The future was uncertain, fraught with complications and difficult conversations. But it was theirs to write. I'm scared, she admitted again, but this time the fear felt different, less like paralyzing terror, and more like the exhilarating fear of stepping into the unknown. Me too, Marcus said, pulling her closer. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. As if summoned by their words, the storm outside began to calm, the rain settling into a gentle rhythm that felt more like a lullaby than a lament. Sarah rested her head against Marcus's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and allowed herself to imagine a future where love wasn't rationed, where affection wasn't earned through perfect behavior, where she could be cherished for exactly who she was. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with judgment and complications and the messy reality of untangling one life to build another. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, Sarah felt hopeful. She had found her way to something real, something honest, something that felt like home. What about your father? She asked, the practical part of her mind already working through the logistics of their new reality. Marcus was quiet for a moment, his hand stroking her hair with infinite gentleness. He made his choice, he said finally. He chose to leave, to build a life that doesn't include us. Now it's our turn to choose. Sarah lifted her head to look at him, seeing in his eyes the same mixture of fear and hope that she felt in her own heart. And what do we choose? We choose us, Marcus said simply. We choose love even when it's complicated, even when it's messy, even when it means starting over. The words settled over her like a promise, like a vow spoken in the sanctuary of their kitchen cathedral. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, but they were tears of relief rather than sorrow, tears of joy rather than regret. I choose you, she said, the words feeling like the most honest thing she had ever spoken. Marcus's smile was brilliant, lighting up his face and warming her from the inside out. I choose you too, he said, sealing the promise with another kiss. That tasted like new beginnings and hope. Outside, the storm had finally passed, leaving behind a world washed clean and full of possibility. Inside, Sarah and Marcus held each other close, no longer stepmother and stepson, but two people who had found something precious in the wreckage of their broken family. They had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, had chosen a path that would lead them far from the life they had known. But as they sat together in the quiet aftermath of their confession, Sarah knew that she had finally found her way. Home, not to a place, but to a person, someone who saw her, valued her, and would never take her for granted. The future stretched ahead of them, uncertain but bright with promise, and for the first time in years, Sarah looked forward to what tomorrow might bring. The rain had stopped, but their story was just beginning.